They say knowledge is power, but in the shadowy world where entertainment met organized crime, knowledge was a weapon. On November 12, 1963, in a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of Chicago, Johnny Rosselli held up a small reel of tape and smiled the kind of smile that destroyed careers and ended lives. "Gentlemen," he said to the assembled mob bosses, "this little recording is worth more than all the casinos in Las Vegas. Because this is how we own Sammy Davis Jr. forever." What was on that tape would remain a secret for over 30 years. But the very existence of those recordings, and dozens like them, revealed the most sinister aspect of Hollywood's golden age: the systematic blackmail operation that turned America's biggest stars into unwilling puppets of organized crime. This is the untold story of how the mob didn't just influence Hollywood, they owned it, one compromising recording at a time. To understand the magnitude of the mob's blackmail operation, you have to understand how they saw entertainers, not as artists, but as assets. Valuable properties that could be leveraged for money, political influence, and power. And the most valuable assets were those with the most to lose. Sammy Davis Jr. was perfect blackmail material. He was famous enough to matter, successful enough to have real influence, and vulnerable enough as a black man in 1960s America to be destroyed by the right scandal at the right time. The mob's interest in Sammy wasn't just about his entertainment value. By 1963, Sammy had become politically active, supporting civil rights causes and developing relationships with politicians. He had performed for President Kennedy, campaigned for Democratic candidates, and was being courted by political operatives who saw him as a bridge to black voters. This made Sammy dangerous to people who preferred to operate in the shadows. The surveillance operation began in 1962, shortly after Sammy's high-profile conversion to Judaism and his increasingly vocal support for civil rights. The Chicago outfit, working with corrupt law enforcement and private investigators, launched a comprehensive effort to document every aspect of Sammy's private life. They bugged his homes in Los Angeles and New York. They planted recording devices in his dressing rooms at various venues. They bribed hotel staff to install listening equipment in suites where Sammy stayed. Most insidiously, they used attractive women, some willing accomplices, others unknowing pawns, to get close to Sammy and record intimate conversations. The operation was run by Johnny Rosselli, the mob's Hollywood specialist, who understood that in the entertainment business, reputation was everything. A career could be destroyed not by bullets or beatings, but by the right piece of information released at the right time. The recordings accumulated over months. Conversations about Sammy's fears, his insecurities, his relationships. Phone calls discussing his political activities and his civil rights work. Private moments that revealed the man behind the entertainer persona. But the most damaging material wasn't political. It was personal. The mob had recordings of Sammy discussing his complicated relationship with his racial identity, his struggles with being accepted in white Hollywood while remaining authentic to the black community. They had conversations where Sammy expressed doubts about some of his political allies, moments of vulnerability that could be taken out of context and weaponized. Most devastating of all, they had recorded evidence of Sammy's romantic relationships, including his ongoing feelings for Kim Novak despite his forced marriage to Lori White. These recordings not only documented his emotional infidelity, but also revealed the pain and anger he felt about being manipulated into a loveless marriage. The existence of these tapes was first revealed during a meeting in Chicago on November 12, 1963. Sam Giancana had called together the heads of the major crime families to discuss their entertainment industry operations. The Kennedy administration's war on organized crime was intensifying, and they needed to ensure their Hollywood assets remained controllable. Johnny Rosselli stood before the assembled bosses with a briefcase full of recording equipment and transcripts. "Our friend Sammy has been very talkative lately," he said, playing a brief excerpt of one tape. The room heard Sammy's voice, tired and emotional, discussing his resentment about being forced to marry someone he didn't love. "This is just a sample," Rosselli continued. "We have hours of material, enough to destroy his marriage, his political connections, his relationship with the black community, and his career, all at once, if we need to." The plan was elegant in its cruelty. The tapes would never be used unless Sammy stepped completely out of line, but their mere existence would ensure his cooperation forever. He could continue performing, continue his political activities within acceptable limits, continue being Sammy Davis Jr., as long as he remembered who really controlled his life. The psychological warfare began subtly. Sammy would arrive at a venue and find that his dressing room had been cleaned while he was performing. Nothing stolen, but everything slightly rearranged, letting him know someone had been there. Phone conversations would include strange clicks and background noises suggesting surveillance. People would make casual comments that referenced private conversations Sammy thought no one else had heard. The message was clear: we are watching, we are listening, we own your secrets. Sammy's behavior began to change in ways that only those closest to him noticed. He became paranoid about phone conversations, often hanging up abruptly or speaking in code. He started varying his routines, taking different routes to venues, staying in different hotels. He hired private security, supposedly for protection from racist threats, but really because he felt constantly watched. Most tellingly, Sammy's political activities became more cautious. He still supported civil rights causes, but he was more careful about which events he attended and what statements he made publicly. The bold, outspoken advocate was gradually being replaced by a more circumspect public figure. The mob had achieved their goal without ever explicitly threatening Sammy. They had made him censor himself. The full extent of the blackmail operation was revealed years later through FBI surveillance of mob meetings and testimony from former organized crime figures who cooperated with law enforcement. According to these sources, the outfit had similar operations targeting dozens of major entertainers. Frank Sinatra was under surveillance, though his own mob connections made him a more complicated target. Dean Martin's drunk act was so convincing that investigators spent months trying to find evidence of real alcohol problems they could exploit. Even Johnny Carson was reportedly recorded during private conversations at mob-connected venues. But Sammy remained the crown jewel of the operation because of his unique position as a politically active black entertainer who could influence both Hollywood and Washington. The psychological toll on Sammy was enormous. Friends noticed that he became increasingly isolated, trusting fewer people with genuine conversations. His marriage to Lorraine White deteriorated further as Sammy became convinced that their private conversations were being monitored. The spontaneous, joyful performer who had charmed audiences for decades was slowly being replaced by a more guarded, careful public figure. The ultimate irony was that the very success that made Sammy valuable to the mob also made him vulnerable to their control. His fame was his prison, his talent was his chains, and his influence was his weakness. The mob's blackmail tapes were never publicly released during Sammy's lifetime, but their existence influenced every major decision he made from 1963 onward. When he endorsed political candidates, when he chose which civil rights events to attend, when he made statements about racial issues, all of these decisions were made with the knowledge that intimate details of his private life could be weaponized against him at any moment. The operation finally began to unravel in the 1970s as federal investigations into organized crime intensified and the old mob power structures started to collapse. Many of the original recordings were reportedly destroyed during FBI raids, while others disappeared into evidence lockers and were eventually lost or destroyed according to standard protocols. But the damage to Sammy's psyche was permanent. Even after the direct threats ended, even after many of the mobsters involved were dead or imprisoned, Sammy never fully trusted that he was truly free from surveillance. He remained cautious about private conversations, paranoid about new relationships, and careful about political statements until the end of his life. The story of the mob's blackmail tapes reveals a dark truth about Hollywood's golden age. The entertainment industry wasn't just influenced by organized crime. It was systematically infiltrated and controlled through the most personal and intimate violations of privacy imaginable. The stars we idolized, the performances we loved, the public statements we heard, all of it was filtered through the knowledge that private moments could become public weapons at any time. The spontaneity and authenticity we thought we were seeing was often just another performance, given by people who knew they were being watched and recorded. For Sammy Davis Jr., the cost of fame became the loss of privacy, the price of influence became the surrender of autonomy, and the reward for talent became a lifetime of looking over his shoulder. The mob's secret tapes didn't just threaten to destroy Sammy's career, they had already destroyed his peace of mind. And in a world where mental freedom was the only freedom that truly mattered, that was the cruelest victory of all. When Johnny Rosselli was murdered in 1976, found dismembered in a barrel floating in Miami's Biscayne Bay, some of his associates claimed the killing was partly motivated by his possession of compromising material about powerful figures. Whether the Sammy Davis Jr. tapes were among the secrets that died with Rosselli remains unknown. But the surveillance operation itself stands as a testament to the mob's understanding that in America, information was more valuable than violence, blackmail was more powerful than bullets, and the threat of exposure was more terrifying than the threat of death. Sammy Davis Jr. survived the mob's blackmail scheme, but he never escaped it. For the rest of his life, every word was spoken with the knowledge that someone might be listening. Every relationship was complicated by the possibility of surveillance. Every moment of happiness was shadowed by the fear that it could be taken away by the release of a 30-year-old recording. The tapes may be gone, but the scars they left on one of America's greatest entertainers remain as evidence of a time when organized crime didn't just threaten bodies, they threatened souls. And in Sammy's case, they won.